Open City Council work session for Tuesday, September 14th. An adjustment of the agenda. We're going to move item 1 to the bottom.
Okay.
As requested.
I would like to take a little bit of time during the order. The letter was sent out by Mr. Quarles. And there was quite a bit of information in there that was inaccurate. And I would just like to explain to the council what those issues were. And I will probably write a letter to Mr. Quarles, just offering to help him anytime he wants to talk about budget or whatever. So I'd like to present that during a good of the order.
Good of the order.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
All in favor?
Yes.
Okay. Public comment? Which I believe, we'll start with Jan.
Hello.
Jan.
Hi. So I am Jan Siebert Warmond for the Cannon Beach Friends of the Trees, P.O. Box 778, Cannon Beach, Oregon, 97110. Dear Mayor and City Councilors, as we stated in our letter to you last week, in some communities, before any tree is allowed to be cut down, there is a tree committee review. If approved for removal, a dollar amount is assigned to that tree, which is not an insignificant amount. A list of replacement trees is provided, as we do already in Cannon Beach, and then the city oversees the replanting and requires the property owner to make certain that the tree is well looked after until it's properly established. With your help and that of city staff and volunteers, we'd like to look into this option for our town going forward. We're also hopeful that you'll decide to somewhat lessen the size of new homes allowed to be built in Cannon Beach, and we realize you're now in the process of possibly doing something of this sort in the very near future. This could save many trees, and we thank you for your consideration. In regard to the building of new homes and even the substantial remodeling of existing homes, a few years ago, we as a community put in place stricter rules for tree protection during the construction process. Certified arborists, including our own past and present Cannon Beach City arborists, weighed in on this matter. It's our hope that we can all help find ways to enforce these rules more effectively. We'll need better monitoring, especially with the numerous amount of building permits being issued. While it's important to find areas throughout our community for planting replacement trees, please keep in mind that the ideal replacement of trees is to plant them as close to the original location as possible. We realize this can be a complex situation, but we need both our public street trees and our private neighborhood trees throughout our town to better control problems of soil erosion, landslide, air pollution, noise, wind, and the destruction of scenic values and wildlife habitat, as well as to protect the wooded character of our city. We think with both the public and private tree protection and removal policies, our experience has shown that although these policies sound good on paper, in practice, it appears that too many trees are still being cut down. We will continue bringing to you our concerns regarding the tree policies and their enforcement issues, with suggestions of how to better protect our community trees. Thank you again for your concern for the trees. Let's go the extra mile for them as often as we possibly can. Yes, a few may be truly hazardous, but the vast majority deserve our support and dedication in order to survive and thrive in these challenging times. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. I don't see anybody else's hand up, so we will move directly to our first item, which I just lost here. Our first item, which is the new municipal judge selection committee. Bruce.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Judge Walter has resigned, and right now we have a judge pro tem who is able to cover municipal court. But the code says that the council will select the judge. Time that I guess it was the time that we selected Judge Walter. There was a committee, and it included the city attorney, city manager, and one counselor. If you would prefer to go that way, we can go ahead and arrange that. If you would like to do some combination of, or even have everybody, come before the entire council, however you would like to do it. If it is in front of the entire council, the whole interview process would be, on one of our televised meetings. And there's, advantages to that. So we just are looking for direction. And also, I believe that the advertisement is included in the job description that we are going to be publishing to try to solicit candidates.
I'm sorry, Bruce, can you sort of clarify what you just said about we'll be publishing?
The job description, which is, first of all, the first attachment A is an advertisement.
Is that what you're referring to?
Well, yes, that is the ad that will be put in to try to solicit. The job description and the interview questions are what follows.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Should we change the population number?
Where does it appear, Robin? Is it?
It's right under municipal court judge. It's on attachment A. And it says
Yeah,
population.
we can change that.
Okay.
And is the salary still going to be negotiable?
I believe so. They'll probably come in and make it as a proposal as opposed to us saying this is what we'll pay.
Okay,
And a question on the personal services contract.
Mhm.
I found it kind of confusing.
Okay.
I don't know if this is just sort of a general purpose contract that's used for all personal services.
Mhm.
It seemed like in certain areas, it didn't seem appropriate for a city judge. So has Ashley gone through this or?
So that was provided by Ashley. So I sent her the one we used in 2013 and I asked if that was still good or if we should use a new one and what she suggested. And she sent me that one.
was there something specific, Mike?
I didn't highlight it, I'm looking right now, but the whole, trying to find it.
Mike, I would think,
Talking about the city's project manager and the providers. What is the providers, what is the judge's project manager? I don't understand project manager being used in this. And I certainly don't understand there's an agreement between the city and an attorney that's going to serve as a judge. Why do we call it the project manager? And certainly, is that that lawyer have it, their own provider? I just,
Should it be changed to city manager because that's what it says?
for the city's project manager is the city manager.
Uh-huh.
Yes, and the provider would be the judge.
Yeah,
I think that this might have been modified from our existing personal services contract, and we can go through
yeah, that's what I
and
was.
look to see if there were sections that are not necessarily that clear for a judge. So when you see this again, we should have made some of those changes.
I was curious about why the mediation will be conducted in Portland,
Mhm.
but the mediator shall be appointed by the presiding judge of the Clatsop County Circuit Court.
Because not everything has been changed. Those were sections we have to correct and change.
So it would be in Astoria. Is that,
In Astoria.
Yeah, the Portland part is highlighted in yellow.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
was the thought, the things that are highlighted, the things that are subject to change?
I think the other things too, I think the things that are highlighted when we're working with Ashley, those are things that we know need to be changed or at least to be filled in. Some other things that, might not have been caught. And so we will go through and take care of that. You'll have a modified, a tailored
Okay,
personal services contract.
my concern. Thank you.
Could we see it again when it's been
Yes,
reworked?
yes, we will bring it to you on October 5th. So you have a chance to look at it. I don't think we've done interviews or anything by that time. So you'll still have an opportunity.
You wouldn't have interviews until you have this correct, would you?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that's not
You can do interview.
to people applying, correct?
no, we would just put out the advertisement at this point. Well, it depends how quickly you want to move. We can put out the advertisement and maybe advertise for 3 or 4 weeks. That would put us past the October 5th, so you would see the contract. Or if you wanted to try to accelerate, we would send you the changes as soon as they're done. And then we would put it on the agenda to see if anybody wanted to talk about it again, like Mike did tonight. So it depends. We tend to slow down a little bit after Labor Day. So we probably could stand to go one more time with the pro tem. So I wouldn't say that this is necessarily a rush situation.
So in regards to that, the line that says the position is open until filled, the first review of applications will be on October 5th. That's subject.
We would change it. We would, yes, we would make that change.
So to answer your question for myself, I don't feel we're in any huge hurry.
Mhm.
As it stated in your packet, Ashley is taking care of the cases currently, is that correct?
No, is the person that is normally the prosecutor?
That's the
Yeah.
Ashley I was referring to.
Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't use the
Ashley.
right.
I guess the
Name.
name Ashley becomes in the training. Yeah.
Who'd have thought?
Okay.
So anyways, Ashley Flukinger is taking care of it now and
Yes.
for the, next few months that it'd be fine. My understanding.
Yes. And then we can bring it, being a slate of candidates to you at November, and I don't know what date that is, but it'd be the first Tuesday in November.
it'd be the 2nd of November.
Oh, yeah, I think there's something else going that day.
Yeah, something else is going on.
Mhm.
Big doings.
Yeah.
Okay. She, now is the prosecuting attorney.
Yes, you normally,
Both roles? I don't see that can happen.
we don't always have a prosecutor. We will find a way to address that somehow. Maybe somebody from Massey's firm could come over and be the prosecutor. We'll make that work. Yeah, it's not a terribly complex situation. No, we just want.
So my understanding of what you're asking of us tonight is, do we want to have one person from the council on the panel or all of us do it? In which case it would be done publicly in a meeting?
Yes, what would happen is all the interviews, if it was the entire council, it would happen, we probably have the person sitting down here. If you appoint some kind of a subcommittee, then the interviews would probably still happen in this room, but not in a public forum. And then we would bring you the recommendation of that committee. The committee can be made up of any combination that you want. We just mentioned that the last time was manager, city attorney, and a counselor. But it can be any other combination. I think if you have more than two counselors, maybe even if it is even two counselors, it might be a public, I'm not sure.
Well, we've been able to hire your position, you know, without doing it until the very end in a public meeting.
I would think, wouldn't that be an executive session kind of situation? It's a hiring situation.
Mhm.
Let me check.
Yeah, hiring is executive.
Having said that, I'm just fine with one city councilor, and I don't know how the rest of you feel.
I think it's sufficient.
I'd also like to point out at this point, I have a client that is an attorney and is interested in the position. And I would feel more comfortable having someone else other than myself interviewing.
Does that mean I have a neighbor that's also interested?
That's very possible. I have a direct
Yeah.
financial relationship with that client, and it seems odd to me.
Why not just let the mayor be our representative on the committee,
I would be more than okay with that,
That would be great.
if the mayor thinks it's okay?
unless he doesn't want to do it.
Oh, that's fine, I'll do it.
Okay. And we'll work with you on the schedule.
Because ultimately, the council needs to approve it.
Yes. Yeah, and I am not, I've never had to hire an attorney, so I might have been incorrect, and Robin might be correct, that you can go through the process the same as you can with a city manager, but I don't know if that's exclusive to your executive or for all positions that you hire.
It just seems odd to hire somebody in a public meeting.
It's very uncomfortable.
I wouldn't feel comfortable
Yeah.
putting someone through that.
Yeah.
I'm okay with approving it,
Yeah,
but we've never done that with any other position that I'm aware of.
We don't do it with police officers.
No. Just appointing committee members is the only thing that we do in public.
And then the final decision. No, I have no problem. The only thing I would ask is, Nancy, you're good at asking questions and stuff. I just, if you wanted to.
No, I would do it if you didn't want to do it. Whatever. Both do it. Maybe we could both do it.
If we can both do it, that would actually be
I know.
effective. That's actually, otherwise Nancy could be the backup.
It's not a public meeting for only two councilors to be there. 3 requires public meeting.
Unless we can get this into executive session.
I think, well, I want to triple check on that because I think the two can talk, but I don't know if they can actually act as an official subgroup, but I don't know all the nuances, but I'll find out.
Is that everything you need, then, Chris?
Yes, yes. And we will take another look at the contract.
So are we starting to advertise them? Or do you want to wait until?
Um,
I have no problem with the advertising being for a longer period of time. That's what you meant by it, extending the timing out.
Mhm.
Yeah, what we can do is schedule interviews after the 5th. So you will have a chance to look at this, the personal services contract. And then shortly thereafter, we can send the personal services contract to anybody that you are looking to interview. We just tell them that it has to be approved. We can send them a draft if they request.
I should. All right. However, the timing works for that. That works. Okay,
Well, I guess I would like to ask if it's going to be you, Sam, and Nancy. Do you feel comfortable with roughly 2-3 weeks to pick a candidate? If they chose October 5th as the deadline, if not, then you'd have less time.
that sounds
If we're looking to approve by the first meeting in November, I guess is my question.
Well, that would be a logical time. The thing that's changing the schedule, driving the schedule now is us giving you another chance to look at the personal services contract. If you're okay with us changing it and then sending it to you, and if anybody says, well, I want to talk about, on October 5th, then we will hold off until then. If we don't get those comments, we'll assume it's okay and we'll start advertising and it'll allow us to start scheduling people sooner.
Okay,
Is that acceptable, Robin? It was your question.
I think it needs to be acceptable to the two people. but-
Fine with me. I don't have.
You were the one that asked about seeing it, so we can do it, but you did.
Yeah, I would like to see it.
Yeah, so we.
That's great. That,
Anybody has an issue, you just let us know right away and we will put the brakes on a little bit. And, it may not be the November 2nd. It might be that we do it at a special meeting on November 9th or December sometime.
and I'm okay with all that. I'm sorry if I muddied this.
No, you didn't. You didn't muddy it. There was a good questions.
I just don't want the contract to hold up beginning the search for a judge.
Well, the way we just went through it, it shouldn't. We'll clean it up, send it to you. And then give you a couple days. And if we don't hear from anybody, we will just go ahead and start the process.
okay. Thank you. Jeff, TSP update.
All right, I just have a quick presentation I want to share on this. All right. Thank you, Mayor, Council. Back for the Transportation System Plan update. I just want to remind everyone, CannonBeachTSP.com to log on there. You'll see many new things on there, but one of the things I want to speak to first off is I think it was in the last Gazette, August 26th, when I don't know, but a couple weeks ago maybe, when the headline, "City nears completion of transportation." That is not true. Okay, it's not true.
What do you expect?
Yeah, and so I asked Kathleen about it, and she said, "I don't get to do that. That's not me. Don't blame me." And so anyhow, but I did want to highlight that, no, this is exactly, I said, we can use this, we can as leverage, because no, it is just the opening of it. We did the listening phase, or started that listening phase with the first open house, the 2 surveys. All of that information now lives up there on Cannon Beach TSP website. And we're announcing on September 22nd at 6 o'clock, the second open house. A week later, we will launch the interactive portion of the online survey open house, which will then allow you guys also to give further feedback on some of the transportation alternatives being proposed from that feedback. So when they said that we were finished or nearing finished the completion, I want to bring back to the timeline. But look at that. No, the second milestone is, we've still got a good 6 months of work left to do on this. So bear with us. This is, the plenty out there. if you go to the materials phase of the Cannon Beach TSP, you'll get all of the archive as we keep loading up the new studies, the survey results. You'll see milestone number 1 outreach summary, which has a kind of a hot link at the just off the press page on our opening page, which kind of gives that first survey results and all of the feedback from PAC in the first webinar open house. And then you can also get down to the raw data. In other words, we have uploaded the kind of spreadsheets for the survey. So you can read line by line what people have commented on that. And so just a reminder, September 22nd, 6 o'clock, Cannon Beach, tsp.com. We'll have a link there, which will link you to the webinar, but we'll also have it on our city website with the news item coming out tomorrow. We're going to blast it Thursday to everyone or all of our email lists as well. So please get the word out. That's what I wanted. That's all I really wanted to say tonight. And I think this is an exciting time because that first phase open house is really about kind of brainstorming. What are your ideas about it? And the second one is starting to prioritize, starting to look at the alternatives out there, and then seeing with the studies. The one thing that I think you're going to find when you read through the reports and everything, that when they did the pedestrian study for this last count, the midsummer pedestrian study, it broke their pedestrian models, that the pedestrian counts were so high
Wow.
that they said that it's higher than even any in Portland that they've ever done. And so
Really?
that's the kind of numbers we're getting on those mad weekends that we have. So when we think it's crazy, they are complaining that it breaks.
It is. Yeah.
So anyhow, I think that's it's great news. It tells us that we're not making this stuff up.
Could you make sure that it's put on Facebook? Because sometimes I see things on our iPads that I'd really like to be able to promote on Facebook. And then I go to the Facebook page, the city's Facebook page, and it's not there, so I can't share it.
Okay.
So,
If you don't see it by the end of Thursday, let me know.
okay.
Thank you. Because I'm not a Facebook person.
Right.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, just a quick question about how you ended that, the breaking their models. Do you know specifically which day they?
Yeah, I can get those. Yeah, I'll get that count. It's in that transportation, some of those materials as well. It's got the actual, we put up these count dates and everything and the date, but I'll get you that. In fact, the transportation planner that did the pedestrian portion of the modeling, I think she is going to be at the PAC meeting at 8:30 in the morning I think she's supposed to be on that so she can talk to the modeling of that. So
Mike, the reason I'm asking the question is that if it was early enough in the summer, is it possible that we had days that were even more crowded?
I think, yeah, I think it was one of our really busy weekends.
Okay.
I don't know if it was our peak,
All right.
It was definitely one of the peak ones though, because I was saying as they were doing them, I'm saying, I'm glad they got this one because it was sunny and it was beautiful and
Mhm.
it was packed. And backing up in the sunset and all that.
Okay,
Can you explain a little bit what you mean? What, were they counting the pedestrians?
Yeah, they did pedestrian counts and traffic counts. as
Okay.
part of the study. And so they run these pedestrian counts where they count, I don't know, this one's the facial recognition, not facial recognition, but it blocks them and counts them across. And so,
Huh.
yeah.
Right.
So,
And during COVID.
Yeah.
yeah.
Were they all wearing masks?
Don't think back at that point.
thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thanks, Jeff. Next item, UGC and annexation discussion.
I'd like to open it up, Mr. Mayor. we've not been approached regarding an annexation in the time I've been here, and I don't know if it ever happened before. But we've had some people come in and talk to us about it. And then we've had the fire district has been asked about annexations. And so it's like, we're probably there. And again, we've not had any serious discussions whatsoever, but we thought it'd be a good idea. Bill can walk everybody through that. If we were to get an official application, what happens, who looks at it, what are the criteria, what are our options, that kind of thing, so that we're not trying to figure it out in the heat of the moment. Right now, we're not advocating annexations, anything like that. It's just, let's all know what's going to happen if it ever happens. And then we're all, able to relax right now and ask questions while we're going through. So Jeff, I don't know if you have anything else?
I don't.
Okay, yeah, but we got Bill here, and please ask all the questions that you want to ask.
Well, Bruce, you did say that you've been approached by 2 parties, though.
But Jeff, what was the?
And so I, because there are going to be applications before the planning commission, at least one of them it's an active application. And so I guess I would defer to Bill on if I'm allowed to discuss those kind of things is what. So let's go to him first. And then if it's okay for me to talk, I'm happy to kind of brief you on what has happened.
And Robin, that was my error to say that we hadn't received an actual application. I wasn't aware that we'd gone that far.
I just have one point that the last annexation that we've had was the property across the highway where Gerald Schroff lives, series of houses.
Mhm.
And then before that was property behind my house and off of Ecola Park Road.
And when was that, Brandon?
That Lang,
Lang and Weeby was in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Weeby one was.
Yeah, and then the one, I was still on the planning commission with Gerald Schroff's property.
It feels like 8 years.
That would have
ago.
been
10.
somewhere in the mid 2000s. It's my best recollection.
There was another one up on the north side way before that, when I was on planning. And we talked about it for the top of Sunset Hill at one point when we were talking about Mike's water problems.
Mhm.
But we didn't,
Yeah, and his,
solve it. We didn't do anything. We just talked about it then.
and his property was brought in as well. Yeah, it's one of the last ones.
Yeah, that was maybe 2016 or 17, because I had to do the GIS and mapping stuff to the state. Just finished that a year ago or so, 2 years ago.
But I do think it's a really good idea to get a handle on it so that we can, because I think especially when we get into the code stuff and how, if we're thinking about the fact that the community is expanding or not, actually not, but how would that happen compared to where we're going to change codes? Also is important.
Yeah.
I'm not advocating it. I would probably be pretty disinterested in annexing anything. But again, it depends on why and how, and a whole mess of data that we need to sort out, because do we have water for, how is the sewer going to be handled? Are we going to have more pump stations? All those kinds of issues that start popping up. So, yeah. Bill, go ahead. I'm sorry, we've been chatting here.
No worries. That's good to hear, and it's a good thing to chat about. And one of the things that I'm hearing, and especially with the discussion about the code, one thing that the city might consider is putting an annexation procedure into the code, because right now the Cannon Beach doesn't have one. Most cities probably do, but it sounds like, the number of annexations are not significant enough to really have driven the city to adopt something in the past. But, that at least gives more of a focus to those questions of, do we have the water? Do we have the sewer? transportation and those types of things, and really allows you to, allows everybody to know what it is that you're going to look at. So without that, without the code provisions, what you're left with is really two parts. Annexations in Oregon really have two pieces. One is a political side, and the other is a land use side, for lack of a better term. And I don't know if you had a chance to look at the materials I provided to you in that LOC handbook. There is about 10 pages that talk through annexations, and then also sent along chapter 222 of the Oregon statutes. And if anybody made it through ORS chapter 222, I'd be impressed, because it is one of the most impenetrable statutes to try to figure out what it says. So don't.
Thanks for sending us that, Bill.
Yeah.
Jeff was saying, what are we looking at when we look at annexations? And that's, a significant part of it. And so I think the handbook does a better job of explaining it without getting into it. I'm sorry, let me put this somewhere, because it seems to keep ringing. So anyway,
Your car warranty is about to expire.
Let me go through the political side and then the land use side. The political side, there's a question of, the land use piece of it can we accommodate annexation? And that's looking at, the water, sewer, transportation, all those other things. And the political side is, do we want to? Because cities have the authority to decide how they want to grow. Do we want to be bigger? Do we not? A property owner who is outside the city doesn't have the right to come into the city. They may want to, but ultimately it is the voters. It is a city's decision. So if you look at ORS chapter 222 as explained in here, the default position is, for an annexation to occur, there has to be a vote in the territory to be annexed and the territory and the city itself. So the people have to want to, who are being annexed, have to want to be annexed, and the city has to say, yeah, we want to annex you. The majority of annexations in the state happen with no vote in either place, because there are a variety of exceptions, and I'll talk about the territory. If in fact 100% of the voters want to come in, that eliminates the need for annexations. There's also triple majority if more than 50% of the people who own more than 50% of the land and more than 50% of the electors in the territory want to come in, they get to come in. There's also a double majority. So there's a variety of ways. Typically, you don't see an annexation without the owners wanting to come in. But there are situations where one owner wants to come in, but for example, the transportation has to go across somebody else's property. And so they'll try to force that person in whether they want to be in or not. And that's where you see the triple or majority or double majority. So that's that side. You got to want people to come in. You've got to get the necessary numbers. And assuming that happens, no elections really required. The other side of it is the city has to say, yeah, we want to let you in. A number of cities in the state have what are known as voter-approved annexations, where all annexations have to be approved by the voters. Cannon Beach hasn't done that. You certainly could add that to your charter, or the voters could add it to the charter, but right now you don't have that, which means that you, the city council, has a choice on the political question of either sending annexations to the voters or holding a public hearing and making a decision yourself. And either one of those are viable. It's really a policy call for you as to whether or not you want to send something to the voters or not. So that's the political side. The other side, without an ordinance sort of guiding annexation, then we fall back on old Oregon cases that talk about whether annexation is reasonable. And there isn't, oh, I'm sorry.
Nope, keep going.
Okay. And that's, that's before cities adopted ordinance sort of guiding things through, the various pieces. Then it was a question of whether it's reasonable. Do we have enough, water? Do we have enough sewer? Do we have these other things? And that is really, the real focus that most people focus on. There are some people who say, nope, we shouldn't grow ever, no matter what. But the reality is, is it reasonable to grow in this location? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And that's where you evaluate, what the essential urban services are. Is this the appropriate location and other things? And so, that's the process that the Planning Commission would go through, and ultimately the City Council make a decision on, is it reasonable to grow? And that's the land use side of it. And then the second is the political side. Do we want to do it now? And that really is the questions about what you're doing. The thing that we haven't done is, gone back and look at how that process through the Planning Commission was structured those last 2 or 3 times to get an idea of how that process ought to work at Planning Commission and then at City Council in terms of what questions they're going to be answering and what they're going to look at. And you guys have more experience with that, with your, with the mayor and Brendan's service looking at the previous annexations. And so, when those come in, we'll make sure we take a look at it. But the questions you want to be thinking about is, one, is this reasonable for it to come in? Do we have the services? Is this the right place? And then second, more politically, do we want to grow and is now the right time to do it? There are a few other things. One thing to think about is that the city has an urban growth boundary. Like most cities, the urban growth boundary is larger than the city itself, not by a significant amount, but there are areas outside. And the assumption with those urban growth boundaries when they're made is that eventually they were going to be annexed because it's, that's where urban growth is appropriately channeled. However, there are cities that have city limits outside, that the city limits go outside the urban growth boundary. Those are rarer, and those typically are holdovers from, a city that annexed a lot of property in the 60s and 70s and then got an urban growth boundary, and essentially we're told that the urban growth boundary couldn't be that big. But that's not a situation we're facing, so it doesn't matter too much going there. Finally, there are some situations with some recent statutes where an owner can force annexation, where they say, and I don't have the bill number in front of me, but essentially, if it's within an urban growth boundary, if 100% of the people agree, if it's, all services can be provided, and I think there's one other condition, they can force the city to annex. Corvallis challenged that in the past. They lost, but they didn't get to the key fight of whether or not that it is contrary to the home rule amendment. There's the home rule charter that Oregon cities have. And we go into a deeper dive on the home rule, but essentially in Oregon, unlike most states, cities are separate entities. They're not subdivisions of the states. And the idea is that cities get to choose for themselves how their basic structure is going to be, and the state doesn't get to tell cities that. And the question is whether or not boundaries are part of that, because there's an argument that when the city goes out and annexes stuff, you're going outside your city, so your powers are sort of at a low ebb. But there's also, in terms of what should be in the city and what shouldn't be, is a real core question about what a city means. And so hopefully we won't be the one that has to decide that question. But if somebody tries to force their way into the city based on that bill, it may be something we're going to have to grapple with. With that, that's sort of the background of what annexation is about in Oregon. And I'm happy to talk through any questions or concepts that you want to talk about.
I have a question on the urban growth boundary. Was that something that was imposed by the state that we had to establish an urban growth boundary, or is that something that the city decided it wanted to do?
State said that you have to have an urban growth boundary, but the city would have decided what that urban growth boundary looked like. And obviously the state would have reviewed and acknowledged it as consistent with the goals. You have the ability to change that urban growth boundary. You'd have to be consistent with the goals if in fact you want to say, we don't want to get any bigger and eliminate those things, or to expand it. Again, you'd have to be consistent with the goals, but you have the city has the right to change it.
So the city could reestablish its urban growth boundary to be coincident with the city limit. Okay.
Theoretically, it's possible. Have to look more at, what those properties are and why they were brought in. But theoretically, it's possible that, you could remove properties from urban growth boundary.
I'm curious about, I kind of asked part of my question, but the relationship of the urban growth boundary and I suppose any annexed property, and how do we set the zoning within that property? Can we then pretty much do it if it's not already, if there's a house on there, you probably go residential. But I mean, what I'm thinking about is if we took some of the current urban growth boundary as an example, could we set a zone in there that is very restrictive?
Could, and let me read you what your comprehensive plan says. Your code doesn't talk about it much, but your plan actually mentions annexation a few places. And one of them says, upon annexation to the city, an area shall be given a plan and zone designation that is consistent with the comprehensive plan, the site's environmental characteristics, the uses being proposed, and is compatible with the designation of adjacent areas. So typically, comprehensive plans plan for the urban growth boundary. And so, the plan likely is given it some comprehensive plan designation, even though it's outside the urban growth boundary. It says upon annexation, this plan would apply. Jeff, do you have those maps offhand? And
We could pull that up. That's on our GIS. There's the city limit and the UGBs involved in that. Are you talking about the comprehensive plan maps? Those are also available on the website.
Yeah, and when I'm looking at the comprehensive plan map, and it doesn't.
Yeah, if you go under our website and put comprehensive plan in the search bar, comprehensive plan over there, it'll have a comprehensive plan maps
and so those areas outside the city limits may already have comprehensive plan designations.
Yeah, and my question, Bill, on that is if we were to rezone those or change the zoning, do we have to redo our agreement with Clatsop County on that?
Likely not. I assume you're talking about the UGMA, the Urban Growth Management Agreement.
The map.
That should set out, how things get zoned upon coming into the city, but it doesn't require a complete renegotiation of that UGMA unless the UGMA tells us to do something we don't want to do.
Okay.
One of the aspects of this is that just by happenstance, I guess, the urban growth boundaries tend to be in really nasty terrain. and literally unbuildable in some instances. An example is what Gerald did on the Shrove property. That was one of the few areas that is actually buildable in that whole area because of the ravines that happen. My curiosity would be if we were proactive and explored some of these things and literally found those areas ahead of time that would be a no-go as far as utilities and a no-go as far as access, and just mark those out ahead of time and say, you know, these are in the urban growth boundary, but they'll never be used. And then consider trying to find maybe other areas that would service for housing or service. I can't think of any myself right offhand, but there might be a couple. And working off of the boundary of the urban growth boundary, beyond that, to find the backside of the hill or something that is not in the view shed and something that is still accessible. I don't know, that's a long and difficult project, but it might be a way of getting ahead of the game, like Bruce was started us with. It's just to know what we're talking about when we do this.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think that if you just were to go and do a constraint map of steep slopes, all of those, at least environmental constraints, and then throw on top of that your water, sewer, where your main lines are, or whatever, your points of distribution, yeah, it would limit it pretty quickly. I would think so.
Interesting.
Yeah, and certainly want to think carefully about situations where you essentially say, these are no-goes. There could be constitutional implications in terms of takings if, the city says, nope, we're never going to allow anything building there ever.
Well, isn't it true that the only way we could say that there's no way to build there is that we wouldn't allow it to be annexed into the city?
Yeah.
But if somebody wanted to build on the property outside our city limits, they're able to do that to a certain extent through the county.
Right. If in
Yeah.
fact, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I agree with what Grant is saying, and there are ownerships up in the hills already, and that would be a taking. I agree with that. But there are other areas that are not, they're all Lewis and Clark.
Yeah,
And so any of those properties that we could expand out to might be the way to create a method of doing it ahead of time.
I see.
yeah, and that's why I kind of brought up that UGB agreement, because with Clatsop County, we would take, like you said, jurisdiction over that zoning wise, and we could set those boundaries, open space or whatever, like you said.
I remember when there was the cutting up on Tillamook Head that was so obvious, and everybody was freaking out about what was going to happen up there. Luckily, we got a good landowner up there. So I'm not too worried about it now, but there still is a chunk that is owned by Willamette, I believe. Anyhow, that could be, there was worry at some point development could happen up in the hills.
Well, and one thing that I think is really important and we need to get a better study about is, I remember when Carolyn Probst was the chair of the Public Works and also on the Watershed Council, and she suggested after we received our study, our water study, which said we had a lot of water, she wanted to combine the Watershed Council and the city to do a further study, which would include fish, wildlife, and habitat in regards to the water. And I think since that's such a big part of who we are, if we could pursue getting a grant to find that out, we would be able to really determine how we can maintain ourselves the way we are. It concerns me that there have been so many building permits issued, 344 this last year. And I just think it's urgent that we need to get a study like this because from what I understand, we also have been pulling water out of the creek this summer. And Carolyn said, when I spoke to her today, that she doesn't remember that has happened since 2014, 15. So I think it's urgent. We're in a drought and we need to really know what we need to have for water to continue being the city we are.
In terms of evaluating any annexation that comes in, understanding where we are in terms of water and sewer and those types of things would be something that's very important in the city's evaluation of how or whether to annex property.
Bill, doesn't the state require cities to have a 20-year supply of land for housing? I'm wondering if we need to consider this when annexations are being proposed. I don't know that we have a 20-year supply of land for housing here right now.
I would be surprised, but the 20-year supply of land typically arises when a city does the update to its comprehensive plan, and Goal 10 requires that. The city typically isn't required to keep that supply of land unless it updates certain things. And so, our comprehensive plan is, when is that from? 1970.
79, yeah, with some amendments.
Yeah, and so the city really hasn't gone back and looked at Goal 10 and its housing supplies, but you're absolutely right. If the city were to go back and look at its housing supply, it would be required to have a 20-year supply of buildable land. And, I would be very surprised if the city had that. The difficulty. Yeah.
Bill, we did do a Clatsop County housing study 3 years ago, so that is a current with buildable land study. I think the thing that we must keep in mind is, and I don't know because I don't know how Oregon interprets needed housing or what housing is required, but we're losing population in Kansas Beach. So we're producing housing, but it's for second homes. And so I think, if you look at the trend in the studies, even back 3 years ago when they didn't have the updated census data, that we had enough housing to cover the 20-year window under the projected vacant lots and buildable land. So throw in the new updated numbers and the increased or decrease in population, I would assume that's the case. But not to say that we shouldn't look at our and study our water, sewer, and housing. Would be the first to say, yes, we need to always do that, in my opinion. Especially these tourist towns, just like I think Robin somewhat point up, but I would second what our biggest issue is the tourism, the water demands by everybody being here at one time. And I don't know if any town that I've really seen has really done a good study of that. So,
and it's really incredible. It's 1,750 people down to 1,400, and do you know the rest of it? I don't know.
80 something. So 12 to 14%.
So it's a huge amount of a decrease of people who live here.
There was also when I was on the planning commission, we did a housing analysis for the 20-year count. I don't know if that data is still around at that time.
It should be.
It should be, but at that time, our determination of planning commission level was that we were not going to add outward. We're going to get more dense.
And that's exactly what's happening.
Mhm.
And that's what happened, but I think the housing study that we did 3 years ago just basically said it was about the same. So it's density wise. So it's kind of intriguing. I'd love to cross-check those numbers, to find out if there was any way to do it.
But I wanted to bring that exact point up, Sam, and, what point do we need to do exactly what we did again? Is it 20 years? Is it to start a few years before the 20 years?
Well, I think like Bill says, I don't know if there is an actual state mandated schedule. I think it's on our own unless we do some dramatic upgrades, which we might be doing. So
My best recollection is that that was done sometime around 2008, 2009. You were on the planning commission at that time as the chair.
Yeah.
But I don't know when that was.
I'd have to go back and try and find the dates. We have an audience all of a sudden.
The other question I have too is, are any of these proposed annexations, I mean, obviously they're not proposed yet, but people considering, are any of these properties within the urban growth boundary or are they outside the urban growth boundary?
And Bill, am I allowed to talk about that, annexation stuff by case basis?
I think identifying the general areas where they are is fine, but we want to be careful about getting too specific about what we're evaluating them on or where the flaws might be or why they might be good candidates. It's more just here's where we got them.
Yeah. So we have one that it's on the border of the city limit. Part of the property is in the city limits and part of the property is in the urban growth boundary. And so it borders that. And it's for the planning commission for a conditional use permit in October.
And the other property?
And the other property, they never told me the actual location. They just said they want to meet about it. And then I didn't hear back from them when I told them I was available, time periods. So they may have no way, but I don't know.
Okay.
So I couldn't tell you that. That's just triggered, when I get two within a short period of time, I said, maybe we should be at least talking about how we do this and set this up. So.
What do we need to decide or move forward, or is this just open discussion?
Open discussion. Yeah, it's something we ought to certainly keep in mind as we do the code audit.
Yeah.
And some of the things Bill suggested is to define how we want those applications to be administered.
Yeah, we have quite a few kind of process questions that I've jotted down that I want to see better language in our code or some language in our code about how to handle these processes. This would be one of those as well.
And when you get a little further along, we probably need another work session to state what does this council want to see and how would they like to see that process handled? Bill suggested a number of different routes we could take. I think we need to make that decision to help develop the code that reflects the council's wishes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments on this?
Just that I'd like to see us look towards revisiting, having the planning commission do what we've done or at least look into when that was last done so that we can perhaps plan when it could be done again, because my intuition is that these exponential increases in building permits can't continue, but if it continues much longer, there's going to be a shortage of lots and there will be pressure on us to do exactly what we're talking about.
If anything, just take the housing study and add to it what's happened since then. That would be it, because the housing study was a heck of a good determination. of-
Yes, I agree.
So,
This might be a good topic for the last item on our agenda, the
yeah,
goal setting and retreat issues.
topic number 1. Okay. I'm thinking that since Jason's people are here, do you want to do your item now?
You bet.
Okay, cool.
Get them home.
Yes. Some of them have schoolwork. All right, so thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I'd like to start with the first part of the agenda here is the lifeguard program. As you know, they cover the main area of our beach here, but they also go down and help in other areas just south and north of us, Crescent Beach, Andy Cola Park, when there's rescues up there, and they do a wonderful job. I'll have each of them introduce themselves, but just some basic statistics. They usually come in around 10 a.m. and get ready, and they get all their equipment ready, but they also have an opportunity to work out at the fire department, get a workout in so that they stay in shape for what they're going to be doing. And they usually start, when do you guys start? In May?
Yeah, we were training weekends in May. This year we had the USLA class, which put us back a couple more weeks.
Yeah, and so that's actually a great program that we've started working with Seaside Fire and Rescue on, because they work cohesively throughout the summer, helping each other out. And so the USLA lifeguard standards are a lot more stringent than we've had in the past. And so they're making sure that they're doing that, but they're also doing a lot of water rescue training, working with jet skis and doing different training at the pool as well. So their shifts go 11 a.m. to 7:15-ish. They had some this summer. I think we had a council meeting when they had a rescue that they had to go out right about 8 o'clock and had done a rescue there as well. But COVID obviously didn't slow down. The lifeguards are the parking age you'll see this summer. And with the lifeguards, we had a tragedy right before summer started. Unfortunately, that's something that I talked with Fire Chief Joey Daniels in Seaside about, is that you can't predict when there's going to be a water rescue. Unfortunately, we'll get them in the middle of winter, and it's just hard for the timing, but they still had other close calls this summer. They did have 2 water rescues, which equaled a total of 4 different people being rescued from the ocean. They had 15 water rescue preventions, 8 rescues that were called off, 4 close calls, 17 first aid calls, and 23 assists for the fire or the police department. This doesn't include the numerous calls for lost and found, lift assists, courtesy, or wildlife calls. So to say that these guys were busy was an understatement, and they do a wonderful job for us. We're very thankful. What I'll do with the lifeguards, if you guys can each stand up and tell us who you are, how long you've been with us, and what your favorite part of being a lifeguard is.
Awesome. I'm Jesse. This is my 4th summer. It's our 84th summer as a program. And I think I misheard you. Did you say 15 preventions? It was 115 preventions.
I was going to see if you knew the
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for paying attention.
Good job, Jason.
Good job.
My favorite part of being a lifeguard has got to be just swimming around Haystack Rock and the sea lions popping up in between us as a group. Just doing the training and the camaraderie of it.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Kimber Parker. This is also my 4th year. And my favorite thing was going to be also the training and swimming around Haystack Rock. I would say the training swims also, but I'll say the ones around the Guanos Rocks, north of Chapman Point. that's my favorite, so.
Thank you.
My name is Genevieve Patty. I actually started halfway through the season. And I would say my favorite part about this crew here is actually the team that we got together and just having the communication with the public and just being there for when we need it. And yeah.
And Genevieve is our first Australian since the 70s.
Very nice. Welcome.
My name's Jesse Williard. I've been with the program, it's my 14th year. And it's been the best office on the coast. That's one of the reasons I love doing it, and also engaging with the public that, comes here from around the world. And COVID certainly hasn't slowed them down getting here. And so, of course, I just love the guys and gals that we have working with us. We've got a great team, and we hope to keep it going into the future. Yeah, I love the team.
And as you can tell by looking at Jesse, he started when he was 1.
This is half of our roster. We had 8 on our roster, and then we added Genevieve. The other ones are doing maritime school, wanting to work on ships, or off in the islands doing
Marine biology
research and other things. So they couldn't be.
We're a busy group of people.
And I'm not very quick, but I noticed the two of you have the same last name. And is there a new lifeguard you wanted to introduce?
There is a little lifeguard out in the hallway.
I'll go get him.
I have a question for Genevieve. Have you met Jim, our first?
I have, yes.
Oh, I'm curious, because he has a house.
They just had to swap stories.
I bet.
This is Ansel Parker. He's been a lifeguard actually, when I was pregnant with him last summer, I did a rescue with him in my belly. He was like the size of a raspberry, but that's a cool story we'll always tell.
So, starts early.
Yeah, but yeah, he's been hanging out on Cannon Beach a lot. Yeah, say hi. Yeah. So this is Ansel. He's 6 months old, and his favorite thing about lifeguarding is going
the four-wheelers, looking at the four-wheelers.
Yeah, looking at the four-wheelers, sure.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think they all missed the parade this year. They always have a fun time with the parade, and they do a good job of being our connection down on the beach for a lot of different things that are going on, especially being the eyes and ears down there for us when we're looking for lost children. So very, very helpful. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Moving on to the parking information aids, or as most of you have heard them called, the parking Nazis.
Yeah.
They have, and I think I've told you all that I started as a parking aide up in Seaside when I was in college, and it's still some of the favorite years of my life just because you grow so much as a person, talking to people, being that first line of people that have to deal with somebody, and unfortunately they deal with people that aren't in the best of moods. And so they did a wonderful job this summer. They all have, it's interesting to see the different personalities that come each summer. And we did have some additions this year. And in fact, between the lifeguards and the parking aides, we had 9 repeat
Wow.
employees, which was great. It's good to have that history because they can pass on what they've learned. And there's a lot of nuances to Cannon Beach, as you all know. So it's really good. This year they increased over 323 citations, parking citations. And so I always get the negatives that come through, but there is a lot of positives that they do and a lot of the good things that we see, especially when they're downtown, helping even on medical calls. This summer, we had a lot that were helping with medical calls and or rescues down on the beach. They would come down and be another set of binoculars to help people look out for the lifeguards. So always a good addition to have them, and we'll have you guys introduce yourselves as well. We can start with Nick here on the end, and then Nick, maybe you can tell us what you're in the process of doing now.
Okay. I'm Nick Hansen. I've been here for 4 years, my 4th summer. I'd say my favorite thing is just being out talking to people and just riding around. and I'm currently in the background process for the Clatsop County Sheriff's Office.
Yeah.
I'm Jackson Scrimmahorn. This is my first year down here. My favorite part was getting to know the different people down here and seeing them around town. And I'm currently in the process of finishing up my senior year of high school, and I'm enlisted in the Coast Guard.
Yeah. Congratulations.
My name is William Hanshu. This is my first year on, and honestly, my favorite part is just exploring a new town, getting to know everything about it, and getting to know the people.
Good job.
I'm Daniel Contier. This is my 6th year on helping out with the city during the summer. And I think my favorite part is just getting to know, helping out the public and helping to kind of get our system down pat so that it can be passed down to the next summer.
Cool.
Thank you.
Good job.
I don't know if you guys can recognize Jackson. The last time you saw him, he was about this tall, standing next to me when I got hired. Well, thank you guys very much and good job. You guys can stay for the rest of the meeting.
You don't have to.
Thank you guys.
Summer's over. So you don't got to listen to him anymore.
Big plus.
For Jackson.
You never listened before, probably.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
Okay, after that interview, we'll go to our tree discussion.
Rich?
CBE construction delivery proposal.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
CBA construction delivery. So,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have talked about the using the construction manager / general contractor probably about 2 or 3 times. And in order for the city to utilize the CMGC method, the city council will need to approve a resolution that lists findings of fact as to why the city feels it's the best method for the Cannon Beach Elementary project. And a draft resolution is attached for your consideration. So what that means is that at some point, you're going to need to approve the resolution. And it has a list of things on there that are reasons why we would want to look at this construction method. And there's a reference of findings of fact. And if you would take a look at these and, make sure that you are supportive of whatever the statements are, because this is the justification for, making the decision. And like I said, we've talked about it 2 or 3 times. One thing that I would like to point out is the responsibilities of the CMGC firm and item 3. The bid process. We see all the bids. What'll happen is that the architect and the construction manager will go ahead and put together the bid packages. Those will come in. They will be, we will see what those are. The construction manager will make a recommendation for who they want to work with, but it'll be based on the lowest responsive bidder. And, but this is not something that occurs away from us. And we will ultimately pay those contracts, but the work that is done by the construction manager is paid for by a fee and is not based on the volume of the bids. There's, again, I mean, I will be happy to discuss any of the things that are in the attachment, which is the findings of fact. And we can move forward after you adopt this. We're bringing it to you for the October 5th meeting. And what, in my mind, what would happen, we're also working on the RFPs for the architect and the RFP for the CMGC. You will approve those RFPs, and I would like to bring them to you possibly October 5th, but maybe October 12th. And then once you have approved those, we will go ahead and submit RFPs. And a very beneficial change has been made in terms of the city's benefit, in that RFPs used to be that you would have to select the best qualified firm, And then you could negotiate with that firm. And if you didn't get, you weren't able to come to an agreement, you canceled them and then you went to the next. Well, now we were able to ask for budget figures in, as part of the RFP. So we will now have financial numbers we've not been able to get before.
I have a couple questions. If you're trying to.
I'm done.
What comes first? I mean, does the city hire a contractor for, the architect engineer first, and then that person selects a contractor, general contractor? Or do you hire them as a team? Or, I mean, are they hired separately? How does that work?
They're hired separately. They're independent and they are hired by council.
Okay, so we're hoping that they'll get along and that they'll know what,
Yes.
you speak each other's language and.
Yes, and they will. I mean, the CMGC is kind of a specialty, but a lot of the bigger firms are doing it. I believe O'Brien, and I don't know what some of the other ones are, but those people do that kind of thing. And when I was talking to ZCS, I said, well, what are your feelings on CMGC? And they said, for a project like this, where you have so many unknowns, I would love to have somebody that's a construction expert right there, looking at the same thing I'm looking at. And the way that does on the general contractor hard bid is that if I want to bid on the project, I'm looking at the complete set of plans that it has not had necessarily a construction, background on the plans. And then look at that, and I can see, well, there's a potential change order there or whatever. But I'm starting my planning at that point. The CMGC, like when they're walking through and looking at the walls or whatever, they're thinking in terms of, okay, how can I, put this bid package together? And what's the best order of things so that the person that's actually going to build it is involved all the way through the design and influences the design.
Well, I understand all
Yeah,
that.
okay.
But I'm just wondering about the
They're
hiring.
separate. Each one of them is hired for a fee. Their contracts reflect the fact that they're going to be working. The architect is working with the CMGC. The CMGC works with the architect. And
So you're hiring one here and one here at the same time.
not exactly at the same time, because you can hire the architect and there's going to be a certain amount of public input and discussions and things like that. But when they start putting together schematic drawings and things like at that point, you want to have the CMGC on board when they really start putting pencil to paper kind of thing.
The other thing I had on your draft here, it talks about the buildings involved were built in the early 1960s and have not been operational for approximately 30 years.
I sent a correction and I don't think it got picked up. I corrected it to 10 years.
Yeah, because it mentions it twice.
Yes.
And the school was closed in 2013.
Right, yes, yeah. And that's just something that we're working with Barry Elsner on the contracts.
Mhm.
And that got sent, and I don't know if I sent it too late for them to pick it up.
Yeah, that could really affect a bid, I think, if somebody's saying, oh gosh, if these buildings haven't been maintained or
Yeah.
operational for 30 years, that's
Right.
a lot more problem with.
Agreed.
Bruce?
Yes, sir.
How would dispute resolution be handled between the parties? Is that something that's predetermined in a contract?
It'll be addressed in the contract. You're less likely to run into it because the CMGC has seen the conditions that are likely to create change orders. And I want to see how Barry Elsner writes the contract, but usually the contractor does not benefit from change orders like they would if they were a GC. They get their fee. Now, if say it's a mechanical contractor and there is a change order required, it would affect their contract. But it's not something that the more change orders, the more that the contractor entity would be able to make more money.
I understand that. My question is, in the event that there's a dispute between us and any of the parties or amongst the parties themselves, which may or may not have anything to do with change orders.
Mhm.
It may happen after the fact with defective work or products.
Well, it would go back to, well, I think you had this under any circumstance. The finger from the GC points at the architect points at the GC. But I think we would have to deal with those kind of things no matter what. But generally, if it's a design flaw, you can trace it back to the, you know, the architect engineer. And if it's just not built right, you would know that it would be from the contractor.
And the reason I'm asking is because we have a very old structure.
Right.
We're, you know, trying to update it as best we can, but I just would like to know ahead of time how some of these problems could get resolved. You know, having that spelled out in a contract ahead of time.
I understand what you're saying, but I think in so many cases, it's going to be fact-based. Like, was it something that the architect didn't do an appropriate design on it? Did the construction manager not necessarily notify? And that'll be covered in the contracts. But I think that you're going to see less of that situation with the CMGC than you would with a traditional contract. But I understand, and you will, we'll have you folks take a look at the contracts too. And they have to be tied, you know, so that they work together. And I will take a special look at the conflict resolution, but usually there's usually not a conflict between them because they have no contractual relationship. So it's going to be, has to be resolved between the owner and the architect, but the owner and the CMGC.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't give you the definitive answer, but.
No, and I think this is something that, you know, by and large would probably occur after the fact unless there is, you know, some type of active dispute during the construction for one reason or another.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that there's going to, I would anticipate because of the conditions of the building, that there's going to be a lot of, I don't call it destructive testing or whatever, but they're going to open the walls. And so when they're talking about the seismic stuff, they should pretty much know what all those conditions are going to be. The roof for the classrooms will already be done. I believe that you're looking at a whole new electrical system, plumbing system, all those kind of things. And so I think
the world I live in is, you know, roofs, windows, sidings, they all provide avenues for leakage.
Right.
And that's where I would anticipate eventual problems occurring. And because it's a commercial structure, I would expect it to be built to a certain standard that would, you know, hopefully prevent those things.
And it will be replacing all the windows.
Great.
Especially on the south side. There's a number of issues, energy conservation, all those kind of things. And so they will all be essentially new assemblies. And then the contact points could be redone so that they're all level and solid and those kind of things. But the roof, like I say, we're working on that now. I'm sorry, there was a third. Roof.
Siding.
And siding. And yeah, we'll have to take a look. And I forgot from the report whether or not all the siding had to be redone, but the entire dome will be re-plywooded, insulated, and shingled. And the exterior, like I said, the south end is mostly window. And so, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna have to eliminate some windows because we need to do bracing and things. So those areas will be solid. So I think we'll have a smaller, you know, window set that'll go in. So, you know, it's a, you know, we know the building for what it is, but I think there's enough that if you can look at the whole thing, you know, and really see what's behind to, you know, to try to do whatever the work is that you have to do.
I don't have any problem with that. It's just that I'd like to see, you know, through the contracts that there's an avenue for us to protect our interests.
Yes.
That's my main concern.
Yes. Yeah, and somehow I think that there should be I don't know if this project is too small for a construction administrator, but a construction administrator that sees all the RFIs going this way and the change orders going this way and all those kind of things through the process, I think is worth doing because they're being critical of whatever happens as it goes. But if you don't, you're relying on whatever drawings or whatever information. Let me see, if there's an RFI that it comes this way, that the information was given on time, that sort of thing. And you're relying on the architect to make sure that all the documentation of those things is done properly. And it may not have been. So I always like having somebody else that is, kind of monitoring that process.
Okay.
Another thing is schedule. And we have already seen a little bit of lackness in the schedule, in that they gave us something that said, city will go ahead and sign the contract like at this point, and then, hiring subs, da-da-da. And then when we were kind of over here, I said, what's the deal? We're still, looking at this contract. And they said, well, that's fine, because even though it said that the city had to sign the contract on the 4th or 5th, they said it's not due till the 22nd. Well, then give us a contract or a schedule that says this is how long the city has to do this. And then these things can either happen before or after. But I just saw that potentially we were in a situation that somebody could make a claim that we signed it too late, and so they weren't able to hire their subcontractors. I knew it was going on, but it wasn't a true schedule. So we pushed hard back on that and said, make sure you had all that stuff documented properly. And the administrator can help with that.
I'll change the subject a little bit. The only concern that I keep running into this and thinking there's something, I understand what the contract manager does, but I'm afraid that what we're going to run into is the perception in the community is, and we got to be careful to explain this properly, is that this person, wherever we hire them from, their job is to get her done. Their job is not to redesign, not to influence the design, not to create what they want to build. Their job is to get done the plan that we approve.
The construction manager, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And
that's because we're going to run into somebody out there is going to say, we've hired somebody from Portland to build us another monstrosity. That's going to be said. They're going to say it about the architect no matter what, wherever we hire them from. I just want to be prepared that the perception needs to be guided a little bit by how we present what this job really is. So I just want to be telling the council to be prepared for that kind of response.
And it'll all be done under the contract, and the responsibilities are split out. But I think that, and I've been hearing this for a long time about bringing people from Portland and all that. We are responsible to build the best, make the best decisions on how we're going to go ahead and build something like this. And we're required to hire based on qualifications. And, it would be great if somebody, locally could, handle the architectural side. I'm not aware of anybody that could handle a project this big, but there are several firms that are relatively local. And for example, in O'Brien does this. And so you're going to find people that be potentially, Seaside or someplace where you have that subset, but you're going to want to have a top end person to build this. That's going to have the background to say, this is where your problem is going to be, or you need to change the material, or you can save money by doing this, something along those lines, that has got the experience in building buildings like this. dealing with restorations. For example, I think with the architect, a lot of times people would say, we want to look at what the past community centers or something like that somebody has done. That is probably about third on my list, maybe fourth, because there's not that much you can do to these buildings. You've already decided what the outside of the gym is going to look like. These, selecting windows and things like that. In my mind, it's incredibly important, the skill set that you have of the mechanical engineer, anybody that's dealing with waterproofing, as Brandon had said, because those are the kind of things that kill projects like this. And so we have to make sure that we're looking at the right skill sets and the best qualified people to be able to do something like this. When we went out for the work that we're doing now with ECS, ECS had background with dealing with several school renovations, all the way up and down the coast. And they've done great for us, the projects that they're doing.
I agree with all that. I'm just preparing us for the perception that all those folks out there that don't understand all that.
Okay, well, if council is concerned about that, then maybe it's possible that you all could do the selection of the CM and the architect. If you, but you're going to have to live by the same qualifications and the same criteria as if staff was doing it. And selecting somebody that is not as qualified as somebody else, and then having a project that's a very bad outcome is not, you haven't done anybody any favors. And what our responsibility in my mind is to the citizens. And so I would want to put, I'm sorry, Robin, you don't think it is a citizens? I might be making a mistake.
No, I was just thinking that I think it would be nice to have the council do the selection.
Okay, but I'm just saying that it's not, yes, it would be a huge responsibility. And if you want to take that up, to be able to go ahead and deal with the possible perception. But it's entirely possible that in your responsibilities of looking who is the most qualified, it could very well be somebody from Portland that's done a lot of similar projects. So I don't know, if we can make the argument that we're hiring the best people for the job, or, but if people just don't want to hear about anybody from Portland, I don't know how you put that into your criteria. I know that I've heard it, but again, best people for the job. That's what I think we're responsible, and I think we're required by the law.
And in this instance, what I'm referring to is the best person for the job, as long as everybody knows what the job is.
Sure. Yeah, and we will have and that's a good example. We'll put the contract on the website if anybody wants to go through it and take a look at how it's going to work.
Okay. Anything else for, one question I had, and you don't have to answer it tonight if I was surprised when I saw the guys working on the roof and what they were doing, but I noticed that the stairwell on the backside, the old fire escape, was gone. And I understand why, because I wouldn't be brave enough to go up that anymore. But I didn't think that was part of the scope of work that we asked them to do.
I think that I concurred with Karen that it needed to come down. We had seen people going up there and kind of testing the door and things like that. And so we took two steps. One was that we took that down because it was an attractive nuisance and it wasn't safe. And then the other thing is on the inside, when we start having people for any reason going in, there will be a block so that you can't go up those stairs, because we don't want to have anybody thinking there's a second exit when there's really not. And so we will make sure that nobody can go up without knowing that that door is blocked and this is the only way back.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah. Yeah, it's when you see people up there a bunch of times with kids and stuff like that, it's like,
Okay. How are they doing? Did we have a timeline on when they're gonna get done with the roof?
I didn't hear him.
Karen, is there we heard from a timeline as far as where they are on the roof?
Yeah, right now, they're just putting all the new plywood down. I'll have to go back and look at the calendar and see when they're expected to have that particular phase done. But they're on time. All the materials were delivered Monday as planned, and they're moving quickly on getting it all down.
And we do know that we have the first winter storm this Friday.
Call it a winter storm, but it's soaker.
Seasonal, yeah, it's first seasonal, 20-degree difference in
I have
temperature.
an on-site meeting on Thursday because I want to talk to them about what they're doing to prepare for the rain that we're going to get this weekend. So.
Okay, thank you.
And how are we doing as far as getting the funding from the jail tax?
It's coming in regularly. And we have the same situation from a cash flow standpoint that we're having to front some money and then we would pay that back. And it could be paid back either by collections if the project goes very slowly, which I hope it does not, or if we are going to do some sort of financing, we could pay ourselves back out of the financing. And I don't know if it'll be required, but we may be bringing back a resolution, and I forgot what the name of it is. But it will say that we reserve the right to pay ourselves back for expenses incurred before the financing comes through. So, and that'll be at our option. But if we are spending a significant amount out of the general fund, that can be a small amount on a debt service, annual debt service payment, then it might make sense for us to go ahead and replenish the general fund. Okay?
All right.
Delegation resolution, that's what it's called.
I'm sorry, Bruce.
It's a delegation resolution.
Great.
I used to do them for contractors and developers.
I'm gonna have to ask for a short break.
Sure.
Okay, we're back. Next item is the concerns about trees and beach. So
Mr. Mayor. I'd sent something around and it included how many building permits we've been dealing with over certain periods of time. Over the past 7 years, the first 5 years, the highest was 115. Last year, it doubled to about 230. And then, I'm sorry, 2 years ago, and 1920, and then I think 2021, it went up as high as about 340. So there's been a lot more activity that has been coming along. We have two sets of trees, the types of trees that might be involved. One are those that are in the right of way. I believe so far this year, we've taken out 19 out of the right of way. And there's been, I don't know, maybe 102 or something that came out of off of private property. When a tree is taken out of the right of way, I want to walk through the process because I hear, the need for oversight and transparency. And that's why I want to go ahead and talk through what it takes before this decision is made or a tree is cut down. When a complaint about a potentially unsafe tree is received, the Public Works Assistant Director tries to do a site visit within 8 hours. If the tree is determined to be a possible hazard, the city arborist, Jeb Gearhart, is contacted and a site visit is scheduled to discuss options for a remedy. If the city arborist deems the tree a hazard, requiring it to be removed, the arborist will write up a tree inspection report along with the tree hazard evaluation form. In the case of a hazard tree, the removal process will start as soon as practical. But there's still, we had two this week that over the weekend that were leaning or were potential hazards. And so those came out more quickly, but normally the trees are not removed that quickly. If a tree does not need to be removed, the arborist will make recommendations for saving the tree. Excuse me. The arborist forwards the reports to Public Works, who initiates tree restoration or removal process. Excuse me just a second. Once a right-of-way tree inspection report is received from the arborist, Public Works creates a tree notice letter and will mail it to all property owners within 100 feet of the tree. This same tree notice is copied to the City Council, Public Works Director, City Manager, and Jeff Adams, the Community Development Director. Public Works also posts the same tree notice on the website, which is Public Notices, City of Cannon Beach, and the two bulletin boards in City Hall and the two at the post office. The public has 10 days from the date of the notice posting to submit public comment on the potential removal. The Public Works makes a notation on the application whether public comment was received and will forward the application to the Community Development Director for review with the public comments. A decision is made to determine what is to happen with the tree. If the Community Development Director approves a removal, Public Works is given a copy of the approved application and the removal is scheduled. Anyone who submitted a public comment also receives a letter notifying them of whether the tree application process was approved or not. They will then have 14 days from the date of that letter being mailed to appeal the decision to the Planning Commission if desired. I also noted that the Parks and Community Services Committee also receives any recent and current tree removal applications in the monthly packet. So there are several bodies that receive any of these notices. The public within 100 feet are notified with a letter. There is a time frame for anybody that wants to appeal. And beyond what is the people within 100 feet, it's also posted here in City Hall. It's posted at the post office. And then once a decision is made, there's still 14 calendar days where somebody can appeal that decision to the Planning Commission. So is there any questions on how or what the process is for a tree that is in a public right of way before it can be cut down. And in almost every case, the city arborist is involved with any of those decisions and is making recommendations. And we have tripled our budget for the city arborist because we're keeping him so busy. Are there any questions on the public?
Do you know how many have been appealed?
I'm not aware. Jeff, since you've been here, has there been any tree
For public or?
For private, or for public, yes.
public that went to the planning commission?
Not that I know of, no.
There was one before Jeff was here and it went to planning commission and then we discovered it was in the ODOT right away.
No.
And there's been a couple people that have given letters, comments, and then you kind of work through that process, but not everybody who gives a comment ends up appealing.
Yeah. So comment letters are taken into consideration during that, but nothing has turned in as an appeal after the decision's been made.
So so this is the baseline process that we're working with now. And if there are any suggestions, know that this is the existing framework and, how you might add any other steps in there, whatever. Next is removal of trees on private property. Requests for removal of trees on private property are processed according to Cannon Beach Municipal Code, Chapter 17.70, tree removal and protection. Application is made to the city and a fee is paid. Community Development Department reviews the application for completeness and responds to the applicant for further or requests additional information if required. If complete, the application is reviewed by the Community Development Director and depending on its classification from emergency to landscape, determines on whether to send it to the city arborist for review and feedback. When applicable, the city arborist reviews the application and does a site visit. The arborist prepares a report which details the conditions of any tree, including those that are not directly in the construction area, but may be impacted by nearby activity, and provides a recommendation about what to do with the tree. The arborist also provides a recommendation for the type of trees that could be replanted if required. The Community Development Director considers the recommendation of the city arborist, signs off on the permit, and notes any replacements that may be required to the contractor or property owner. Jeff, is there anything you want to add to the private side?
No, just that similar to what the public side, I mean, we've doubled our city arborist since I've been here, paying for city arborist resources. And so, we're paying city arborists a lot of money each year to come out and review that. Our fees do not equate to that. We charge, the city arborist charges the city $250. We pay $50 for a tree permit. So these are things that I think we need to look at, and sure that we talk about how sensitive we are to raising fees, but that's another one that's prices go up because those reports, we demand those reports on anything that's really got any kind of question. We usually ask the city arborist to look at, and he's done a great job. I really respect his work, and I think Jan respects his work as well. And so, I really think Jeff Gearhart does a great job. I'm really happy to work with him. He's very level-headed about it all. And so.
Okay, well, anyway, in the trees on private property, we're following chapter 17.70. And any comments or whatever? I think one of the difficult parts of this is that we're dealing with private property issues. And that's something that we have to consider when we're talking about any regulations.
Is there a notice sent out to surrounding property owners when private property trees are not brought?
No.
Is there a reason for that?
Specify that, and just like Bruce said, these are private property. This is somebody's private property, and require them to give us a plan, not in the building permit or within the access or utilities, and don't let them just tear down anything unless it's going to jeopardize the root system or safety of that tree.
And Jeff looks at, not this Jeff, but Jeff Gearhart looks at conditions that there might be root damage or other things as a result of the construction. If we were to send, like, when we do it for our property, I mean, we can go through and say, okay, well, we've got this appeal process. But if the tree is owned, say, by you, and the arborist has looked at it and said it's not going to survive the construction process, and this tree is in the way, and and that's if they build within setbacks and all that kind of stuff, the tree is right there in it. I don't know if we have the ability to go ahead and say you must build a smaller house. And then the other is if we were to go ahead and send out under that condition, and somebody sends, that letter to me saying that Nancy's going to cut down, a tree or two. Are we going to give me the ability to say, no, she's not? When it's on your private property and you're doing everything, within the code. And I think that if we say we're going to go ahead and send letters out to, to everybody within a certain distance. First of all, it's a lot of letters because there's a lot of construction going on. But also, we have to say, what's likely to happen with that. And if the council wants to put in the code saying that if we get complaints and we won't let you cut down your tree, I'm not sure if we would be, sustained and, if there was ever a challenge to that. So the one with the tree and the public, I can see because it's ours and everybody's questioning it. I'm not sure if the same process, how that would be interpreted. The answer is you're telling somebody on private property that's meeting all the code requirements that you can't take that tree down because I don't want you to take it down.
And I think that Jan brought up a great point. I mean, I think that, to look at the ordinances and say, where can we go with this? If that's it, trees are, one of the key concerns, then it's a lot of coverage. It's the things we talked about the other night with code audit and things like that, making the houses smaller and code audit, that saves more, space, if you want to call it. So that, decreases the jeopardizing these trees and their root structures and compaction that is caused by that. So, I think that's more of the direction you want to go. But like Bruce says, I mean, just to notify somebody that somebody's cutting down a tree, I don't know where that goes from that, unless you're taking the effort to kind of, by the city, making the more objective standard of saying you can't build in those areas.
Yeah, I think the code, at least for the private property concern, is if we can work the code so that it sort of constrains, but not totally limits people to it. If you have a system like you absolutely can cut down any tree within the footprint, but anything outside of the footprint goes through a process. So you have to ask for it so that they have to take more of a consideration of designing around a tree if the tree is off to one side or something like that, rather than bringing in their design, plopping it on the piece of property and cutting down everything that just happens to fit. Make them designed for the property, which doesn't always happen.
It was more of a tradition in the past to do it that way.
Yeah, and that was because builders, could do that without, it was easier than cutting down a tree in some cases. I don't know. The part where we talk about the public right-of-way issue is where we run into the safety versus the tree. I'm always torn with how this works because my sense, everybody says, well, the arborist is the one that's the moderator. No, the arborist is the scientist. He tells us whether it's safe or not. There's nobody really speaking for the tree. We have no spokesperson system. So we're depending on the neighbors within 100 feet, the counselors and a few other people that are notified about this tree that's going to get cut down. I would almost talk to the tree group and say, okay, you guys are now going to be the advocates for the trees. You'll be notified, whenever there's a tree of concern. And again, always give us the sense that, okay, we know this tree is going to fall. There's a difference when you know it's going to fall within the next week and whether it might fall sometime in the next few years. There's a big difference there. The other thing is maybe we should look more into pruning and tree maintenance within the right of way, so that we do an inventory of and I don't know where we're at with the Heritage Tree Program. That should cover some of that stuff, I hope. I don't know.
That's what I wanted to bring up, Mayor, is the Heritage Tree Program. I think that's a vehicle towards that, but also when we look at this transportation system plan, you're going to be getting in the next couple of open houses, what we call our corridor plan, or, what are the different types of corridors you want to see in certain areas. Through that, you should be able to say, we want to see one side of the street parking, but the other side should be trees. A tree program can be put in place. The one that's not, utility bound. And so those are the kind of things I think that need to work together, and, the Heritage Tree Program for those public street trees that are important to keep. So I think there's avenues for working through that.
Yeah, and again, also is to really start a replanting program through the winter when they're going to get watered. And thank you for the one on the end of Taft. There's a new tree.
Yay! Thank you, Sam, for mentioning that.
So, yeah, I think replanting also is a whole other program that we really should start going on.
In Seaside, they have a city tree board, and it is comprised of 5 members. They are on a term of 3 years. And what the purpose of the city board is to study, investigate, and develop and/or update annually a written plan for the care, preservation, pruning, planting, replanting, removal, and disposition of trees in parks, along streets, and in other park areas. The tree board, when requested by the city council, shall consider, investigate, make findings, report, and recommend upon any special matter or question coming within the scope of the duties and responsibilities, which are to develop criteria for city staff or contractors to apply in making decisions entrusted to staff and/or contractor discretion, designate heritage trees on public and private land within the city, promote the planting and proper maintenance of trees through special events, including annual Arbor Day, and obtain the annual Tree City USA designation. One thing, when I was driving through Seaside the other day to go to the memorial service for the policemen, I noticed that the street just kitty corner across from the convention center actually had a sidewalk that worked around a tree. And I think that's the whole different mindset that we have to start having, is where there is a special tree, it should be acknowledged and not just cut down.
I need to find out, 'cause I don't know of a situation where we put in a sidewalk and took a tree down as a result of it. I know there's a situation just south of here where there was a road that in order to get around, I guess they did, in order to save a tree, they put the road on somebody's private property. And then when they developed, we had to move the road, and then eventually that tree was taken down, but the tree did not come down as a result. I guess it did come down as a result of the road being moved, but the road should never have been on private property. And the only way to get the road off private property, which everybody had been driving across, was to do the tree. So that's the only one. I'm not aware of any sidewalk situations that we had that we took down a tree, right, especially a significant one.
Well, I'm just saying when people are creating new sidewalks, that it should be considered that if there are trees that are on the edge, that they be considered.
Yeah, I think that again, to me, is the thing that the Heritage Tree Program is going to stay. Because if we
Yeah.
have a certain tree that is considered a heritage tree, that's got to happen. I mean, that's, even if the right of way, we could either purchase land or do something, that's the way that's going to work, the way I see it. Another point that I wanted to bring up, I walked, because of the concerning tree that happened at the north end of town, I walked around and I looked at all of the trees on Hemlock downtown between First and Third were all planted in the 70s, except that one. That was the only one that had been longer lived than the ones that are currently there. But again, when you think about the 70s, that's 50 years old, all those pine trees, and they're aging out.
Yeah.
Because the storms are going to start breaking them up. Pines don't like storms. They're not as strong as the spruces and some of the others. But what we're going to really need to really start considering is how to maybe even ask private property owners to consider planting. Even if they're not building and they're not doing anything else, consider it, because we've got spaces where it doesn't have to be a gigantic fir tree. It can be a nice decorative, it can be a low growing beech, it can be fun trees, unique trees. We've got a climate that's going to really change, so we can do that. So I think that's another part of the program that maybe we should start.
Yeah. Can I?
Go ahead, Jeff.
When I worked in coastal Georgia, our community had worked with the University of Georgia, one of their school programs for masters, and had done a similar thing where they took a tree inventory of the community as part of their, I think, heritage or landscape or legacy tree. I can't remember what they call it. But anyhow, that's what they did. And that way it gave them kind of an inventory of what years, predicted years they were, how old, the age of the tree and the type of tree. And so they could tell by the inventory, where were they missing things and where they could, when they do the replanting, what they would be, what's best serves the community moving forward. So yeah, I think that there's opportunities out there for when you do these legacy tree programs to work with organizations or communities that will, either through grants or through universities or research institutes that want to help communities do these kind of things. So that's why I'm looking forward to the new planner coming on board, because we can do these kind of things.
What does our current plan require of a homeowner that does remove trees in regards to a construction project? Are they required to replant anything?
No, there's a list of recommended trees, and our arborist usually recommends which ones that he would.
So they are required to replant some tree.
Yeah, there's if you have 4 or more on your property, you are required to keep those 4 per 5,000 square feet kind of average is what it's about. And so, I think to be fair to Jan and all those that are concerned, because I'm concerned as well. I mean, my background's landscape architecture. I'm not somebody who likes to see trees come down any more than anyone else. And, the last person I want to meet with is Jan over trees, because I know she's passionate about those and she's gonna give me some trouble. And so, you know, I want to help Jan. I want to help those people that care about trees, because every community I work in are arbor and tree cities. So, yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, in my opinion, we just have to continue to work on different, you know, we have to look at those things like the replacement trees and what they're replaced with. But yeah, our arborist does a really concerted effort to give you what he recommends, because of, you know, these weren't really the best trees to begin with. I think you need to pull the natives. And so there's like 8 or so natives that are recommended in our list, but then you have to replace them with to that. Now, if you don't have any on your property, there's nothing that makes you have to plant any or whatever.
No, my question was specifically if they're removed because of the construction process, are they required to replant X number of trees?
Yeah, you know, we don't make them say, you know, if it's over the 4, you know, we don't make them put exactly the same amount back, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what is the enforcement to make sure that it's actually done?
Well, that is, you know, one area that I wish I had more resources on. I mean, I'll be the first to say that how we're doing it through the e-permitting process now is we're putting little flags on it. We go in our final inspection now, and they were required to have those at final inspection. Now, to say that we keep them, like Jen mentioned, keep them vital throughout a year or 2 years, there's nothing in our code that says that, or there's nothing holding someone to do that as a private property owner. And so, you know, that might be some area we look at in the future, but, you know, I would like to see, and even if it's just by the property owner, if they would mind if we came back, you know, a year from now, just to check to see the vitality of those, you know, whatever, something to check on how they're establishing and how they're taking, because right now it's really just, do they have them at final inspection? They meet by coverage and things like that. And it's part of that, and then we're signed off on it. That's the community.
Well, just my experience in the construction industry, that oftentimes a home is finalized without any landscaping having occurred because it can.
Yeah. And yeah, so now that's part of our process now, is that we each go out and we sign off on it and make sure that. In fact, this week, you know, we just was out yesterday and had to write up and put a stop, you know, we're not giving you one until you do these things.
Then I have one more follow-up question, I'll be brief about it, is that the other way, you know, private property owners have their trees removed is that the same problems happen anywhere else. You have a hazard tree. And is there no mechanism to have trees replanted in that situation as well?
If somebody comes in for a hazard tree and it's a emergency hazard tree, you know, if it's a threatening type of tree, that's often the only one that I won't call in the arborist. I mean, if it's leaning on something like that, and I'll do it, but we still make them, if they don't have 4, I still make them replace it. And usually they'll do that. But that's a good point. I mean, I don't think there's anything possibly in the ordinance that requires that, but I'll look into that.
Okay.
I have not heard people say, you know, that they're wanting to put a new one in somewhere, so.
You know, our municipal code 1770-040 tree replacement details the conditions that Jeff, you've been talking about. And it's pretty clear with a nice list of 8 different trees that are acceptable. What I don't see is any part of the code, and maybe it's there, but anything that addresses the public right-of-way tree removal and tree replacement. So I don't know if there is. I haven't found it.
That's over there and, you know, it's in right-of-way section of the code, but it also refers back to that tree private, the tree removal.
Oh, the same process, okay.
So they have, theirs talks about notice to the surrounding landowners and everything like that, so.
Okay, good talk. Karen,
I might just like to make a call out to Jeff Gearhart as our city arborist. If you'll recall, 4 years ago, Mark Barnes used one arborist and I used another one. And there was a lot of conflict in the way we approached trees in general. Mark and I got a lot of feedback from each of our committees regarding how trees were being handled. And if you recall, at that time, we put an RFP out to get one arborist for the city so that we would have more of a cohesive approach to how we address our trees. And feedback from the committee, looking at those candidates, was unanimously Jeff Gearhart, because he was not in the tree cutting business, and that was specifically what we put in our RFP. And his single focus was to help us find a way to save the tree. And instead of, if it couldn't be saved, instead of cutting it down to the ground, create some sort of bird habitat. And if you'll notice around town, and even in our ECFR, we've lost trees, Jeff has gone out and he has created some type of bird habitat for us. And you'll see that along Hemlock, most recently down where the two homes are built on the corner of Hemlock and help me out, Jeff.
Which one?
Across from the Pick and Pan Cape.
No, further south, I'm sorry.
Down on Taft.
Oh, down in Tolabana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a tree that was leaning towards Hemlock. Jeff counts and it definitely needs to come down, but this is one where we don't take it from the ground. Let's create a bird habitat. And he did. And so his focus, number one, is to try to help us find a way to preserve the tree. And he does a great job of that. In the city right away, every year, as you guys know, not only do we get 75 to 100 starter trees from Greenwood each year that the city uses, and anywhere that we are not able to use those trees, we hand out to our local residents and encourage them to plant those trees on their private property. And they give us 3 different types of starter trees. They're not always the ones that grow really huge. And so we advocate that as part of our 12 Days of Earth and our Arbor Day. It's part of our efforts to stay a Tree City USA community. And so between Kirk's private little nursery, if you will, that we do all year long, all those starter trees that we get from Greenwood, we're doing that every single year. Last year, we did not get them because of COVID. But we feel this year our numbers of tree planting are going to be back up. So there is a concerted effort every year. It's part of the discussion we have with the Parks Committee. Even though these are not in the parks, they do 12 Days of Earth. And so we have a running list all year long of potential areas that we keep track of. We say we're going to plant a tree there. And so this is something that's always in our forethought. It's not to just take trees down. It's to save them and find places where we can replant them. But the location of the pot shop was very unique because of what we have underneath Hemlock. And if you'll remember, we have some abandoned fuel tanks at Moon Brothers property there. That if we were going to have to bore in that street or dig in that street, there was a very unusual situation there that was very risky and very costly for the city. And that had to be considered first and foremost.
Karen, what company does our arborist work with? I mean, does he have his own company?
I mean, he's self-employed. He has a company name and his license number and all that. I mean, he's not part of a great big
Treescapes.
tree.
What's his company's name?
Treescapes, Northwest Treescapes.
Trees Northwest
Yeah.
or something like that.
Trees Northwest?
Treescapes, Northwest.
Safety Northwest, okay.
He's out in Nehalem, I believe, or Manzanita.
Yeah. And, the follow-up on that is that, I'm, on my job description from a new planner, I put certified arborist as one of the, if you don't have one, we will hope you would get in the next year or two. It's not to take away Jeff's job, it's to supplement and to do these things like Brandon said, going back and following up, making sure that we have proper trees in place. So I do see that as one of the main roles of the new planner once they come on board, and to work on these programs that we're talking about legacy. So.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of wonderful things about Jeff Gerhard.
He's a very impartial person, and like I say, he does extraordinary things. Not only has he taught us about tree maintenance and trimming and ways that we can care for our trees, but like I said, to find every way possible that we can save the tree. He was pivotal in this aphid infestation that our community got. And he was really purposeful and strategic about trees that we kept an eye on and trees that he felt would recover from that. And he was spot on with every one of the ones that he wrote up for us. So he's done, and believe me, there are a lot of people in this community that panicked and gave us calls saying that tree's dying, it's going to come down. And most of those trees recovered. We did not have to remove a lot of trees because we hate it. And a lot of people originally thought that we would. So he's done a fabulous job for us. It's great to have someone on staff, but it's good to have somebody that's just, they have no dog in the fight. They're completely impartial, and their single goal is to help us preserve our trees and to plant trees in good locations that don't compete with the infrastructure and that will be able to survive.
I think one of the things that Karen and Trevor talked to me about today is we found that the park is not good because it gets wet, and they don't last very long because of the root damage. And then one that surprised me was Whale Park. The way that the buildings are there, that just creates a wind tunnel. And they put things in the planters, they put things other places, and they just can't get trees to survive in this location. So the idea that we're finding out where are places that, yes, we'd love to put trees, but they're not going to survive, we're identifying those.
Well, Trail Park used to be a parking lot.
Yeah.
And it's still down there, and it's all just fill. So, okay. Any last comments on that topic?
Is there any direction to staff as far as modifications, anything?
Well, I think what I've heard tonight is, there is concern about trees being removed, but I also feel like the city's doing a tremendous amount to replant the trees. So if you don't mind, Bruce, if you could at least maybe give us an approximation for the amount of trees that were cut, how many were replanted, I think goes a long way towards showing the public that, yes, indeed, we are concerned about this, because I am. And I feel like replanting trees is, it's not as good as having that original tree, but there are reasons that they have to come down.
And also you need to recycle.
Yes.
Because trees don't live forever. But yes, no, we can do that. And we have the report that you've seen that talks about how many trees have come down. Last year was not a good example as far as replanting because of COVID. This year that's going to change. And so it'll be pretty easy to show the different, how many we plant versus how many we take down.
Great.
We'll make that, Jen, if you would remember, just to make that part of the annual report.
Yeah, and I was looking at real quick to see our last Tree City USA application, because we have to put in there how many trees we replant.
You're recorded every year.
And I can't go as fast as you guys are talking. So.
I don't think that's true.
I bet you're pretty close.
Yes, yes.
Now that one, I can't find that on this one, because I'm not doing it anymore, so I don't know where to look exactly for it, but we'll find it.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure we put it in part of the annual report.
And Jen, if you just send that in an email tomorrow to council.
Okay.
Find it.
I'd like to make sure too that we have some kind of a monitoring system so that people who do have to replant to replace trees that have come down on, even on private property.
Yeah, we'll do that. Like Bruce said, we'll just put that, if it's not in our current tree report, that'll be part of their current tree report that we do monthly to the planning.
I just want to make sure that, because I know when I first moved here in, on the north side, I had to take a tree down for some reason. I can't remember why. And I was told I had to replace it and that they would, I had to replace it within a year. Well, nobody ever came around and checked to see if I replaced a tree.
I think that's one of the benefits we're seeing with the Planner One. It's not something that Jeff can find time for, but that's something that, because it's
Well, the
private.
code enforcement officer might be able to do something.
Yeah. And no one said Trevor Mount, but Trevor Mount does a heck of a lot for looking after these trees and trying to figure out how to save the trees.
Yeah. He puts an awful lot of his personal self into these discussions. Okay. Moving on.
Next item is our retreat, goal setting. Do we want to set some timeline for this? I've always hoped that we could do it before the beginning of the year. Always winds up being a little last, but when we do it, the better we have for the budgeting process later.
I think if we try to do anything towards the mid to end of December, it's just not going to happen. But if we can try to do it shortly after Thanksgiving, maybe.
Is that
early in December?
We did it in December last year.
Before Christmas, right?
Yeah. I think it was,
December's usually, early December's usually before Christmas, yeah.
Always, just usually.
Once in a while.
So the first week or of December. Is everybody comfortable with the, what do we do? We had a day, good part of the day, and then we proposed that if we wanted to go longer, we could go a second day.
Yeah, so last year we did the 15th and 16th. So we did 11 to 4 on the 15th. And then we did, or the 17th. And then we did 11 to 4 on the 17th. So we did Tuesday, the 15th and Thursday, the 17th
And that was in December?
in December.
I like that. Thought that worked well.
Our city council meetings will occur on the 7th and the 14th.
The 14th and 14th is on Tuesday.
15, 16 or 16, 17 with the Wednesday, Thursday or Thursday, Friday of that week.
Wednesday, the 15th is out because that's court.
Okay.
So if we wanted to do
Thursday, Friday.
Thursday, Friday, there is a parks meeting at 9 AM on Thursday, the 16th.
Are we going to do it here or are we doing it somewhere else?
It's always more comfortable somewhere else to me, but
But then we have the, if we go somewhere else, we won't always have the Zoom option.
That was
Oh,
the
that's-
problem last year.
Yeah, and so that's why we ended up back here, was because we've been Zooming all of our public meetings. We
Yeah.
have one that we can't Zoom.
It's important. We're talking about the same dates, but I think the 8th and the 9th are possible too. That's a Wednesday, Thursday, the first week of December.
And there's absolutely nothing booked on either of those days.
Yeah.
there you go.
Let's do that.
Okay.
There you go.
It's just knowing that we've got a meeting on the 7th, 8th and 9th.
Mhm.
And do you want to do 11 to 4 again?
Might as well.
Sure.
As far as the agenda, we'll do the, same sort of process. We'll send information or send ideas to Bruce and then we'll compile an agenda out of that. Okay.
Can I bring up a couple things? Okay. This is for the good of the order. I've been contacted by a concerned resident who noticed there has been significant spraying via backpack by, I don't know, do you call it Lewis and Clark or Greenwood? And this person is aware of how frequently and has noticed that this is quite a lot more spraying. I guess we've been fortunate to have dry weather because I think it can be very concerning if it gets into our water. But I was hoping we could look into that a little bit.
Where is this occurring?
I will get more specific. I'll get more specific for
If you get that information to us, we'll follow up.
Is it in our city limits? I wouldn't assume so.
No, if it's Greenwood, they're doing their properties or their access.
Yeah, that I think is.
And I've, several years ago, Mark explained to me, I don't know if it was to the council, the backpack program uses so much less because it's very pinpointed. Even though it looks like they're spraying the whole area, it's far less than the truck because it's.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a heck of a lot less than the
Or
air.
the plane.
So this is the system that they work with for their access points primarily because it is the least invasive.
You know, when we met with them, they said that they're using the solution, which is 5% of what is recommended. So they're using a much less, they're finding that it's taking care of it without using the full dosage.
For Scotch broom? Yeah.
So that's all I know, and we could ask Mark if they wanted to do a presentation, we could do it.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is about the bus routes and that they have been discontinued. Are we as a city helping to encourage them to come back, or is there anything we can do about it?
I've talked to Jeff. They still don't have the drivers. Let me see, I'm sure we're not writing checks that would pay for the drivers, but for the route that we pay for separately, which I think is probably about up now. But yes, and I meet monthly with Jeff.
Okay. Could you find out if they're going to be bringing them back?
They
They
can't
are.
find, they lost drivers.
Yeah.
They can't find drivers. So bringing them back is the whole goal.
Okay, so they're just gone.
Yeah, that's their issue.
Okay. And then about vaccinations within, I guess that's a hot topic this week. Can you give me any kind of a report about what the city's doing that way?
The city, as far as our staff,
Yes.
we are requiring masks anytime that you're, inside of City Hall. We have not made it mandatory for people to be vaccinated. I know that we have people that have had medical issues that their doctors recommended that they don't get vaccinated. And I don't know, because we don't ask as far as what the percentage is, because it's kind of a medical thing that we're not.
Because I understand the city of Astoria is requiring that their people
Right.
get vaccinated.
Mhm.
So,
Are you requiring any kind of testing for those who aren't vaccinated?
No, we're following all the protocols. For example, we had somebody that had some symptoms. We isolated them away from work. And they did test positive. Wasn't anything that it was unlikely it was a contact from here, but that person is still off work. And so far, we have not had a case. We've had people that tested positive. We've had people that have had to go into quarantine, those kind of things. But it's never been traced back to a contact here. Because we've been very careful. Karen is back on just, one person in a truck. They come together if they've got to do a job to do that. They're wearing masks or trying to wear masks for those kind of things. But we don't have two people, working together. I mean, even Joe and I don't know if that's still the case, but Joe, Karen, Joe and Kurt, we still have them separated. Yeah. So that's how we're trying to address it.
So we're kind of waiting for people to test positive on their own before we test to see. In other words, we're not somebody to have symptoms before we test.
We don't test.
Yeah.
If you have symptoms, go home. You don't have to use your sick leave. You don't have to use vacation. We'll pay you on COVID leave. And then you get tested. And then, you report to us whether you were positive or not. And then so that we can make any adjustments that we have to.
I believe Rick said the county will not test for employers requiring it for unvaccinated people. Yeah, the county won't actually do that if it's a work requirement if you're not vaccinated.
Say that the county won't test
won't test unvaccinated people as a work requirement. So they won't do that at the county level.
Only for symptoms.
Only for symptoms. But if your work says if you're unvaccinated, we want you to get a test once a week, the county has said they won't do that.
But they could get a test at Walgreens or Rite Aid or someplace like that, or Safeway.
Yeah, somewhere else. I'm just saying the county won't do it though.
I've heard that the self-tests will be much more available soon, but I don't know what that means. It might be a good idea if the city can get them before everybody else can, find out, at least have some just in case.
Yeah. Put Rick on that. He's very good at hiring.
And I know we had a vaccine clinic over at the Gardens last Wednesday. That was another, I saw people going in while I was here, not too many, but a few. I don't know what the numbers were.
We're getting in the 30s every time. And one of our bigger employers has given a significant financial incentive to get tested.
To get tested or vaccinated?
I'm sorry, vaccinated. Yes, thank you, Mike.
And we're still the highest in the county.
for percentage of people.
Yeah.
Do you know what it is?
Close to 80%, isn't it?
Well over 80 now.
I think it's like 90.
Yeah.
That's what Rick was telling us.
Wow, that's wonderful.
But that's just us, not the visitors.
True.
In North County.
Okay, first you had something you wanted to talk about.
Just a couple of points on that. And first of all, I want to say that I'm not criticizing Mr. Quarles because I had a heck of a time trying to go ahead and sort these numbers out myself. Lori helped us and Jen helped us, but we did find some things. Have it up there. Oh. Yeah, they kind of.
fund. Okay, good, thanks.
Just hold it down.
Right. If you recall, the report said that the city had a budget of 32 or 31 or $32 million. And that was an unfortunate timing for us that the number is so high. But if you look the previous year, we were at 20 million. But that was the COVID year, so we were way down. More normal year was closer to about 24 million, and that was 2020. So I won't bother to compare to the COVID year, but if you look, where the big differences are, is that in 20, we were, for capital outlay, we were like $3.4 million here. And then we were at then we went up to, how did that work?
72.2 million.
Yeah, that's a 22, yes, okay, so that's the budget for the year that we was referring to. So it went up to 7.2, and so the difference, 6, no, how the heck, how this works? All right, so it was 2. I'm having a heck of a time trying to make this work, Rusty.
The wrong button.
I think so.
Ooh,
That
helps.
Wow. The top button down.
Hold the top button down. Okay, let me go ahead and compare to COVID because it's easier. I can do it all the way across. This was a year that we had a $20 million budget. And if you notice, we had $782,000 in capital outlay. The difference between the 20 and the 30, or the 32, or whatever the number comes out to be, the difference is $6,430,000 in capital outlay. That was in utilities. The projects that we have, regarding resiliency, all those other things, those are shown in the budget. They're shown as fully funded because they're funded with a loan. So without doing anything different, that's the difference in the capital outlay side. And then we have, let's see. I had this figured out before and I apologize, but the transfers out, from here. Okay, for the transfers out was $2.924 million. When we fund a utility project, it is paid for out of say the water fund. The reserve transfers the money to the water fund. And so each one of those transfers is included as a funding source. And so when we go from the 3.9 to the 5.7, that was an additional 2.8 million. And if you just take the 6.4 difference variance in the 2.8, that alone addresses 9,295,000. So by just happening to select this year, when we put all of those projects in, because the projects are in, we're doing all these transfers, $9 million of this, the difference is in just those two accounts. I won't try to go ahead and explain everything else with it. Another difference is that Carmel by the Sea does not provide utilities. And a big portion of the funding and in our budget is utilities. So it's hard to make a comparison there. And then Seaside, interestingly, their budget is not 34 million, it is 71 million. And where that, and I've got a copy of their budget, but where that shows up is that their budget, when you're looking at just the operational costs, is about 34 million. But then there's a whole nother section over this way that includes the things I just talked about. internal transfers, contingency, unappropriated funding, ending fund balance, all that comes up to 71 million. These things are already incorporated into our numbers. So it's not a $34 million budget. When you do all the transfers and things, it's a $71 million budget. So in trying to find, and I acknowledge that it's hard, there was a whole section of the Seaside budget that was not incorporated. It was just the general fund. And Carmel does not have a utility system. And so that brings us much closer as far as the relative budgets. And almost 9.3 million is in capital outlay and transfers because we're doing those projects. So it doesn't, I don't know if it explains everything, but the comparisons and the conclusions that were drawn, I don't think are appropriate. There's a whole nother discussion about decisions that have been made, be it Southwind or the school. And those have all been made, with public input. They're projects that are in the budget. They're things that the council has, provided direction to move forward with. And that's all part of the process. And people, if they have issues, they need to be, more cognizant of all the things that the city is involved in and why we're involved in them. So I just wanted to provide that perspective, I think, on the numbers that were there, because I think the conclusion is that we're way out of control.
Yeah, we have extensive budget meetings every year.
Yeah.
At least 3.
Yeah.
Sometimes more. And they are public meetings.
Mhm.
And although I'm focused on what we're working on, I'm not aware that I've ever seen any public attendees at those meetings. It may have been an exception, but I don't recall ever seeing anybody from the public come to a budget meeting. And frankly, I wouldn't either. But it's complex, and utility or city municipal budgeting doesn't make sense to somebody like me that grew up in the corporate world looking at budgeting. It's a totally different animal.
Yeah.
So, but public's always welcome to come and listen to the discussion and try to understand what is really happening in the budget process.
Yeah. And even if you understand financial budgeting, which is what business uses, we do fund accounting. So it's very different. So even if you're looking at it and you're just trying to find those kind of numbers, it's not quite the same.
With what Mike was just saying about the budget meeting is the time to make comments about how the city spends things. We have had a couple attendees, usual suspects in a couple cases, but I agree, we have not had anybody pay attention to that aspect of how the city works and understand that that is a valuable resource when there is concern. It doesn't help to voice concerns like this one that are ill-informed when the budget committee is there to do exactly that, to help inform you. So.
And that budget committee is comprised of the public,
right,
as well as the council.
Right. And there's something else I wanted to say is that we had a meeting with the joint meeting with DRB and Planning Commission. That was an amazing meeting. Everybody got in, everybody's trying to go ahead and dissect it, and we're making plans. I think, but one of the important things to me is that is probably the biggest thing that this generation of council will do, because we're recognizing all the problems that previous rules and things like that had not covered. And so we're being proactive and saying, okay, we're going to go ahead and find ways to address all of these things and hopefully make it better moving forward, so that because otherwise, if we go in default, everything that's bad will just keep getting worse. And we're taking another step. So it's incredibly important. I think that you all did a great job with it. but nobody listened. You know, even, with the people who are talking about trees and growth and all that kind of stuff, very few people, get involved until we say, okay, we're going to limit height. And then all of a sudden, anybody that might be impacted shows up. But it's disappointing to me that, and I know everybody's busy, but you are off into an extremely important subject, something that's gonna be really important to the future of the city. And we're not, it's unfortunate that people aren't paying attention.
Yeah, I put on my Facebook page, so there's two important meetings that are coming up, and one of those meetings was that was the code audit meeting. And I sent it actually out to individuals as well as put it on my Facebook page. And I don't think I got any reaction.
Tommy noticed it.
Well, good. But yeah, I mean, the word is sort of out there, but not very much, not very well.
They show up, you're all aware of decisions been made.
Yeah, exactly. And then they'll scream and yell and say, it just happened. And why are we doing this so quickly?
Right.
I know you're all well aware of the fact that Lolly is piling a bunch of comments. So FYI.
Well, and I think Wally's doing a great job. She's not trying to censor anyone or guide them. And Ken Quarles' letter is just one that has created a discussion where things can be explained. So I think it's all valuable to receive and assimilate if you can.
No, I agree. And I'll write a letter to Ken and just put some stuff out. But it's not critical because I couldn't figure this stuff out. Somebody had to help me with it. And but just, I don't know how to close that gap between doing important works and then getting people to pay attention when the things that people are concerned about are being worked on. And I've never seen that gap bridged. And it's disappointing. And you can definitely see it here. There's a few people, but there's a lot of people that we're being criticized right now. And that's fine if people, feel that way. But I think we have a good story to tell. I think we're doing good work. But that's not how it's being portrayed. And
well, we just don't have a communications system here adequate in terms, I'm not saying, city in general, we just, I've often said the one newspaper that we have comes out twice a month or every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it doesn't tell what it's supposed, it just doesn't cover what it's supposed to cover.
Yeah.
So we don't have anything else. We don't have a television system or anything like that. So, and you can't ask people to remember to look at the city website, even though all the information's on there. People just don't do that.
Yeah.
So
but just if we can get, the word out to more folks that, especially the code audit. That's that thing is going to be monumental.
Yeah.
For the future. It's going to seem like making sausage now, but it'll be monumental in the future.
the only thing I could suggest is sending out postcards when we really get to some of the big decisions on the code audit, sending out, mailing out. I know it's money, but it at least gets the word out. If you mail out mailers to post office boxes, for people to get in there. And flyers on doorknobs.
In the code audit, they're also doing a billing insert.
What's that?
For the code audit, they're also doing a billing insert.
That would help
For the
too.
first public hearing, try to get it out further.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else for good of the order?
Back here tomorrow night.
We have coffee with the counselors next Monday.
Coffee with counselors.
Coffee with the counselors next Monday, 10 a.m. here.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.